Hey church, thanks for joining me for today's devotion. If you don't know me, my name's Nathan and I'm one of the pastors here at IKON Church. My wife April and I have the privilege of leading our Rotherham campus as well as our creative team. And I have a really simple thought that I want to share with you today. I don't know whether, like me, you are getting a bit fed up of social media at the minute, but occasionally it comes up with some real gems, and this is one of them. Sparked a real train of thought in me that I wanted to share with you today. The post that I saw was from a worship leader and a songwriter at Hillsong called Brooke Liggett-Wood, and it simply said this: "Don't forget to worship. Don't forget to worship." And you know, that's such a simple statement, and yet I feel there's a lot of power in it. Because you know, there's so much going on in our world right now. We might be in lockdown, some things might feel like they're at a standstill, and yet we can feel busier than ever. Or we can feel like time is getting away from us. I don't know about you, but multiple times over the last few months I've gone, surely it's not the weekend already. It can't be Sunday already. Like, where has that week gone? Things can feel so busy or so quick or so rushed, but in amongst whatever we have going on, we have to make time to worship. We can't forget to worship. Because you know, worship is our fuel. It's our source of energy and passion. Jesus, during his 3 years of ministry on the earth, must have been so unbelievably busy. You know, he was in high demand. People wanted to hear him speak. They wanted to come and see if the rumours were true. They wanted healing. They wanted to witness miracles. They wanted to see Jesus for themselves. And yet, even in all this busyness, this huge demand, Jesus continually took time out to spend time with the Father. You know, he would take himself out to mountaintops, to hillsides. He'd take himself away from the crowds, away from the busyness, and he would take time to worship and pray. And if that's how Jesus modelled it, then I think that's how we should do it. Don't forget to worship, because the truth is that if Jesus needed it, then you and I definitely need it too. And you know, in nature, if you take a living thing and put it in situations, in circumstances that it's not made for, then that living thing will suffer. So a fish out of water can't survive. A plant made to grow without sunlight will wither away. And you and I were created to worship. Worship was breathed into the very fabric of our design. Without worship, we're never going to find ourselves in that sweet spot. We're never going to be living to our full potential. You know, we might struggle on. We might convince ourselves that maybe we don't need it. But our lives will never compare to a life filled with and marked by worship of our Creator. And you know, even more than that, your worship is not just for you. I believe that we have to worship for the world. So like I said, there's so much going on in our world right now. We are facing, as a society, as a culture, so many challenges, so many issues. It can be so difficult to know what to do. And there's a responsibility on each and every one of us. But I believe that if we start with worship, then God will help us to manage the rest. There's this great story in the book of Acts where there's two guys called Paul and Silas in prison, and they're wrapped up in chains. They've been imprisoned for simply for their faith, for preaching and teaching the good news about Jesus. They've been locked up, and while they're in that prison in the middle of the night, they're in chains, and yet we find them singing hymns. And while they're singing hymns, this incredible miracle happens where the ground shakes and their shackles are gone. And not only that, but the other prisoners' chains drop too. And the jailer on duty ends up giving his life to Jesus. You know, none of us would want to worship in that situation. I think it's fair to admit that in a situation of being locked up because of our faith, we probably wouldn't be our first response, would be to worship. Or maybe it's just me, I don't know. But you know, by choosing to worship, these two guys saw God turn a challenge into an opportunity. You know, God didn't just help them in the challenge of being locked up, being imprisoned for their faith. He actually provided them an opportunity. Because not only did he set them free from the challenge that they were in, but he gave them the opportunity to talk about Jesus, to see people find salvation, to see this jailer and his family come to know Jesus. And you know, when we worship, I believe that we can see the same thing, God taking challenges and turning them into opportunities. Because the challenges that face our world right now represent some of the biggest opportunities that we could imagine. You know, we could see equality. We could see justice for people who would desperately need it. We could see enormous shifts in the culture and the fabric of our society. But I think the key for us as Jesus followers is to keep making time for worship. Because we need to fight for these things that are important. And you know, we can fight by ourselves, but if we start from a position of worship, if we surrender to God first, the Spirit that raised Christ from the dead will reside, will live in each and every one of us. That's the promise of Scripture, it's the promise of God to us. And that, I believe, is how we can see the world transformed for good. So my encouragement to us today is this: don't forget to worship. Don't forget to worship, firstly, because it's your fuel. It's the thing that drives you. It's the thing that gives you passion. Ultimately, it's the thing that you were created for. And secondly, don't forget to worship because it's not just for you, but it's for the world.